Liz from Caravan Guard Insurance. Now, owning a motorhome gives you the freedom to not only explore the UK, but travel further afield into Europe. From travelling through Germany's Black Forest to the Swiss Alps and even the Italian Dolomites, touring a motorhome in Europe can be a fantastic experience as well as being very accessible. But there are some important things to remember, whether you're an experienced European holidaymaker or heading to Europe in your motorhome for the very first time. This includes making sure you have comprehensive and specialist motorhome insurance cover, as well as extended breakdown cover should the worst happen. Catbird, also known as Wandering Bird, has travelled to lots of European destinations and has written a number of motorhoming books, as well as giving regular talks about motorhome travel. And we're thrilled to have Cat join us in this video to share her top tips for motorhoming in Europe, including route planning, essential paperwork, what to pack and what to expect on overseas roads and campsites. So let's start by asking, why is Europe perfect for motorhome travel?
Europe is perfect for motorhoming because there's so much space and it is set up for motorhoming and campervanning, and it is just so much freedom. So rather than having to book up campsites or your routes months in advance, you can tour around, you can go wherever you feel like on the day, you can go based on the weather, you can go based on what other people have told you. There's just so much freedom and it's fantastic. So when you're prepping your vehicle to go across into Europe, you need to put together a folder with some documents in it. Very important that you take your real original V5 logbook, which shows that you are the owner of the vehicle. If you're not the legal owner of the vehicle, so your name isn't on the V5 or you don't have the V5, if perhaps it's a hire vehicle, you need to get a letter or one of the forms that states that you are able to take the vehicle across the border into Europe. You also need to take obviously your passport, make sure that it is in date and has at least 6 months on there. The 6 months can include your time in Europe because obviously you've only got 90 days and they need at least 3 clear months from when you're planning to leave the Schengen zone. Then you need to take your driving license, again check that it is in date, so easy to forget that. You need to make sure that you have got your vehicle insurance sorted out. Really simple, easy thing to forget, but make sure it covers you for Europe and that you have adequate cover, not just third-party cover, but make sure it's really comprehensive. And the same with breakdown cover, again, so easy to forget. Make sure that it covers you for Europe and that it will adequately cover you to bring it back to the UK should something happen to it. And finally, it's a really good idea to take your own European accident form, which is a multi-layer form where you write on it and it goes all the way through to the layers, so that if you do have an accident, it can be done in the language of wherever you happen to be. Highly recommend that you understand what you're signing before you sign it, but the form talks you through all that. You can get a copy of that from your insurer. So in terms of insurance, as well as obviously your vehicle insurance, you want to make sure that you and anyone you're travelling with are covered. So you can still get the GHIC or GHIC card, which has a basic level of cover for the countries that have a reciprocal agreement with us. But I highly recommend getting your own travel insurance as well, especially if you do something like breaking your leg. Repatriating you to the UK gets really expensive, so make sure you've got adequate cover for that. And then if you travel with a pet, you might want to make sure they're covered in Europe as well. You do not need an international driving permit for most countries in Europe, particularly the main countries in Western Europe. If you go to countries in the far east of Europe, some of them do require international driving permits. So I recommend checking the government website to make sure you've got the most up-to-date information about that. The other thing that a lot of people are worried about are green cards. So if you're just taking your motorhome or your campervan, you're not towing anything, and you haven't got a trailer, you will not need a green card, again, for the majority of countries in Europe. There are definite limits to how long you can stay now within the Schengen zone. So for the majority of people, if you have not got a passport for a country within the Schengen zone, you only have 90 days in any rolling 180-day period, which can get quite awkward to try and figure out, but unfortunately those are the rules. There is a possibility of extending your stay in a specific country if you go and speak to their embassy, and then you have to obviously pay money and show your proof of funds, but that can be quite time consuming and it has to be done several months before you leave the UK. So if you remember 90 to 180 days, then you'll be absolutely fine within the rules. So before you head off into Europe, there are some things that you need to do and buy while you're in the UK. The first of those is things like your headlight deflectors. Now, not every motorhome needs these, certainly more modern ones that have got straightforward pointing lights. You don't actually need headlight deflectors anymore. My advice to you is to not wait until you're either on the ferry or the tunnel when you've got about 0.2 of a millimetre between you and the vehicle in front of you, because you'll put them on wrong. But make sure that you have got time to do it, perhaps while you're waiting to board the ferry. A couple of other things that you're going to need on your vehicle is a UK sticker on the rear of your vehicle. If you're over 3.5 tonnes, there are a couple of things you need to consider. One is angle mort stickers in France. And that is particularly if you're going into built-up zones. So if you're coming off the tunnel and you're just driving across into Belgium or onto Germany and you're just cutting that corner, you don't need them. But if you are going to go into built-up areas, you will. So there are also some personal bits that you need, certainly in terms of emergency kit, like some countries require high-vis jackets, some countries require a first aid kit. All of these will vary from country to country, so you need to be aware of all of the requirements for all the countries that you're driving through, not just your final destination. So for example, if you're driving down to Spain, then you're going to go through France, you'll need to have all of the emergency kit that France requires you to have as well. And I highly recommend that you check the UK Gov website for the most up-to-date information, because they do change on a regular basis. The majority of countries in Europe use a toll system. So you can pay for that as you travel. So you can pay for that with a card most normally. Some accept cash, but not all do. And obviously the toll system is going to be on the left-hand side of the vehicle, so the opposite side to most people in the UK steering wheel. So for that reason, I recommend having a toll tag fitted. Very simple and straightforward. There are lots of different companies that you can use to get one, but it just means that when you go into a peage station or a toll station, the little tag will pick up and will beep, and then your card will be charged. It makes it so much easier, but you don't need one of those. You can pay as you go. So like I said, that applies to most countries in Europe. The few countries that don't have a toll system charge a overall price for driving on their main roads, and those are Switzerland, Austria and Slovenia. Those are the most common ones. And for that you buy a vignette, as it's called. You buy them at the border, so you don't have to buy them in advance, and that gives you the ability to drive across Switzerland, for example, for the amount of time that you have selected on your vignette, and then you can just drive as normal, so you don't pay as you go on every toll station on that one. The term vignette is what causes a lot of confusion for people, because as well as a vignette for some of the countries to drive on their main roads, you also need vignettes to go into the clean air zones. Now in France, they're called critère stickers. They're also called critère vignettes, and you will need one of these on each country that offers them. So for example, France has one sticker that will cover you for all of the zones. Doesn't mean you can go into every zone, and it doesn't mean you can go into every zone all the time. So some zones, they've got certain levels you can only go into. Some zones are, say, between 8 and 8, you can or you can't. And then other zones are fine, you can just access as long as you've got the appropriate sticker. Probably the biggest thing that people are worried about, which surprised them because it's not that much to concern them, is the driving. So obviously driving on the other side of the road sounds terrifying, and I know the first time I did it, it was quite scary, but the whole road system is set up for you to be on that side. So all the slip roads go off that way, the roundabouts have got these really helpful arrows on them, everything is set up. So within 5-10 minutes of getting off the tunnel or the ferry, you won't even think about it anymore. It's so straightforward. But if you are really anxious, there are some things that you can do to help you prep. So the best way that I would recommend is joining some sort of organised tour. The nice thing about joining a group that is going to help you go across is that they can help you prep your vehicle, know what you need, they can answer any of your questions. I know Wandering Bird does that, but there are other companies as well who do the same thing. So they will help you plan it all, but also help you with the practical side of all that stuff. Also, you can also look into like the road signs. So for example, France have priority à droite at some of the roundabouts, but not all, just to keep you on your toes. And that's the X that you have, sort of does this, and then you need to know what that means. So obviously that means that once you're on the roundabout, people who are not on the roundabout, who are coming onto the roundabout, have right of way. It makes no sense. But that means that you have to stop on the roundabout and let them on and let them go, and then you can carry on again. But you need to know these kind of things. So if you do a little bit of research beforehand, or indeed, like I say, join some sort of organised tour, it will help make things a little bit less challenging or stressful for you. One of the best things about touring Europe is the fact that you don't need to plan necessarily months and months in advance. You can be really free and flexible with your touring because of all the different systems that they've got set up for you. So, for example, I don't tend to plan a lot of my routes, certainly until I'm there. For me, I tend to plan my trips based on activities or things I want to see or do, and then I will plan campsites if I'm using them, but I tend to use airs or wild spots as I'm traveling around, which doesn't need a lot of pre-planning. There's a couple of tools that I use which help with the planning. One is Wilder Trips, which I adore, and that is where I can have all my brain dump of all the places that I want to see and things I want to do, put it all into a big long list. It then puts it all on a map for me, and then I can arrange those in an order that makes sense. So perhaps a loop or a zigzag or however I want to do that trip. That's how I arrange it in my head, and then on a daily basis I will look on the next thing. Oh, I want to go here, and then I'll look at the route or however it works for that. Now, if you are touring around Europe in July or August and you want to go to some popular destinations like the Italian lakes or the west coast of France, I highly recommend that you book your campsite, especially if you want things with a swimming pool or a restaurant or a kids club or surf club, because they do get booked up really far in advance. But if you're able to travel outside of peak season, or if you can be more flexible about where you stay or you want to come inland a little bit, you don't need to book at all. You can just go and see where you end up. The best thing about Europe is the variety of places that you can stay. So the three main categories they come under are campsites, then you've got airs or approved parking spots, or you have then got wild parking or wild camping, whatever you want to call it. So breaking those down, campsites are very similar to what you would expect here in the UK. The facilities will differ. If you go to very modern, quite new campsites, they'll be exactly like you would expect from a modern, fairly new campsite here in the UK. You do have to consider sometimes the electric power lead. Normally you'll use the exact same one that you use here in the UK, but some of them will have a little 2-pin adapter that you might want to have as an extension to your power lead so that you can use the same one. If you're traveling outside of the peak school holidays, there is a scheme that I highly recommend you look at, which is ACSI or AXI, the camping card scheme. And this gives you access to hundreds of campsites across Europe where you can actually get the stay overnight for a discount, and within 4 or 5 nights you'll actually get back what you paid to join the camping card scheme. So if you're doing a lot of campsites in Europe, then that's really worth doing, but only if you can travel outside of the main peak holidays. So the next one down is airs. Airs are brilliant. They are approved areas for camping, but for motorhomes and campervans only. And they can vary from literally a car park or a gravel area to almost like a small campsite that has got some facilities. So normally I'd say they don't have facilities. They certainly don't have electric hookup. Sometimes there will be a toilet, and more commonly there will be a place to empty your grey waste, and sometimes there will be a place to empty your toilet waste and also to get fresh water. Occasionally you'll need to pay for those, so top tip is to save your €1 and €2 coins so that you can use those facilities. But often they're just imagine a car park that you are allowed to stay in overnight. Some are free. Most have a small charge. We're talking anywhere from €5 to perhaps €15 for the night, and you will pay that at the pay station. It's really straightforward to use. Sometimes you have to display a ticket, or sometimes you just put your reg in, and it's really easy to use. You find them on several apps. There are a couple that I use when I'm in Europe. One is called Park for Night. Highly recommend you pay for it. I believe it's somewhere around £10 for the year. Well worth it. But the other one that I use is one called Camper Contact. And that is especially if you've got a larger vehicle, which means that you won't fit into a lot of the pitches on normal airs. Whereas Camper Contact, you could actually filter them down by length, so you could find where you wanted to go. And then the last one is obviously staying off grid, wild parking. There are lots of restrictions in Europe, just like there are here in the UK. Certainly national parks are a no-no. A lot of the French coastline is restricted. So if you do want to stay off-grid, either use the airs because they're completely off-grid, or come right inland and be well away from any buildings or built-up areas. So managing your services abroad in Europe is actually really straightforward. Obviously, if you are using a campsite, then you're going to have a lot of the same facilities that you have here in the UK. So you can empty your toilet waste, you can empty your grey waste, and you can refill with fresh water. That's really straightforward. The other good thing that they've got in Europe is they have service points. On a lot of the main motorway service stations, I don't recommend staying overnight there, but I do recommend going in and using them. And you can find those on, again, the Park for Night app's really good for showing them. So one of the little motorhome with the little waste bit underneath. And there's generally a pull-in bit, so the grey waste goes into the grill, and then you can pay to empty your toilet properly and then also refill with fresh drinking water. So if you are staying in airs or wild spots, it's really easy to stay off grid for weeks on end. The couple of things that make life a little bit more complicated is gas. And gas, the problem with gas is the gas bottles over in Europe do not fit the same, they don't have the same connections as our UK system. So if you have got refillable gas system, then you will have got several different types of nozzle connections, which means that when you go into a refillable gas station, you will then attach one of those appropriate fittings in order to refill your system. If you have got exchangeable bottles, you will need to bring with you from the UK the appropriate pigtails, which is the hoses that go from your gas system to the bottle. And you will need to then take some sort of adjustable spanner so that you can attach the correct pigtail, and then you will need to go and buy a bottle. They're fairly easy to find. Often the big supermarkets or some of the larger garages will have them, but you will have to do the same thing that you would do here in the UK. So set up a contract and pay a deposit and all of that stuff. It can get really expensive. So if you can, I'd recommend fitting a refillable system if you're going to be doing a lot of touring in Europe. So I mentioned briefly over the electric hookups before, so most of them you will have the exact same connections that you use in the UK, same lead, same everything, it's dead easy. A couple of things that you do need to be aware of. Some sites have got the 2-pin plug, so you just need to bring with you a little lead that plugs into the end of your normal electric lead, and then you plug in the 2-pin plug to the socket and use it the same way. The other thing you need to be aware of is something which strikes fear into the heart of a lot of motorhomers, that's reverse polarity. And it is a problem, but it's not as common a problem as the forums and Facebook groups would have you believe. So then you would plug in your lead as normal, and then you plug in your little reverse polarity checker to any 3-pin socket in your vehicle, and it will light up, and those lights will tell you if you've got an issue with reverse polarity or not. If you don't, great. If you do, there's a little lead that you can buy that you plug in again to your lead, and it will just change it all over so it's safe for you to use. So we mentioned previously about you need to pack certain kit, especially certain emergency kit. And if you want a full list of those, you can get the Wandering Bird checklist, and we will leave the link there for you. But on top of that, there's some other things I recommend, though I highly recommend taking some spare fuses of all different types, and also a spare light bulb, because those are quite difficult to find. You do need to be really careful about your weight limit, and obviously making sure you're not going above your weight limit with your payload, which I know is so easy to do, but they do check. And the other thing you might want to take are things that are quintessentially British, which are very difficult. Bear in mind the laws, you're not allowed to take anything with meat or dairy products, and if you want to get the most up-to-date laws, then check on the UK Gov website. One of the best things about travelling in Europe is that you get to explore or experience so many different cultures and languages and countries in a really short space of time. So obviously you've got language differences, but there are a couple of really good things you can do. So Google Translate is a godsend, and that is you can talk into it and then it will talk to whoever you're talking to, like we're having a conversation. But the best thing that I use it for all the time is the camera app, which will translate a menu, it will translate a sign. But there are also, like you mentioned, cultural differences, so things like the shop shut, especially in France, but some other countries as well. They really like their siestas, so you can expect most of the big shops to shut over lunchtime for a couple of hours. Some of the supermarkets stay open, but that's something to research before you go and don't be shocked about. A couple of other things that people find surprising is sometimes on the campsites they'll take your passport, but it's fairly normal, and they'll keep it behind the desk and then you get it back again. And also do research any activities or events or things like the Tour de France which are happening in the area that you're going to, because that can really affect road closures, it can affect how busy campsites are. So doing a little bit of research before you go really helps. I love touring Europe with Mac. There's so much space and things that he can run around with, so I actually really enjoy going to Europe with my dog, but there are of course a few things that you need to be aware of. So the first thing you need to do is have your paperwork in order. If you're lucky enough to still have a European pet passport that is still valid, then you can use that, and if you have got one of them, you can just cross from the UK into Europe without having to do anything else in advance. If, like most of us, you don't have a valid pet passport anymore, you need to get something called an animal health certificate, and these are the rules currently. They may well change in the future, so make sure you check the UK Gov website. But at the moment, what you need to do is up to 10 days before you're due to travel, go see a vet who can issue an animal health certificate. Make sure that your dog has had a rabies vaccination that's still in date and that has got the microchip and everything, and then all you do is you take your pet, you take the paperwork, and they give you this animal health certificate, and that becomes their pet passport for that trip. You have to repeat that process for every trip. The other thing to be aware of is everybody, whether you've got a pet passport or an animal health certificate, they have to have a tapeworm vaccination that's issued by a vet in Europe up to 5 days before you cross back into the UK, and that has to be done every time as well, and then all the paperwork has to be signed for that.
Don't forget, wherever your motorhome adventures take you in Europe, having the right insurance and breakdown cover for your leisure vehicle is really important. Caravan Guard's specialist motorhome insurance can be extended to give comprehensive European cover for 270 days, and European breakdown cover can also be added to assist you if you break down on the continent. As with all insurance and breakdown policies, if you're travelling to more unusual destinations, check that cover applies in all the countries that you plan to visit. For more motorhoming hints and tips, why not head on over to the Caravan Guard website. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy your motorhome travels wherever they might take you.